Coming up on this Wednesday edition of Newsline at Noon, President Park faces a political crisis after the resignation of her second Prime Minister nominee puts the brakes on her envisioned reform drive. The US National Transportation Safety Board concludes the pilot's mismanagement led to the Asiana Airlines plane crash in San Francisco last July. Plus, relations between China and North Korea have cooled significantly, with Beijing increasing pressure on Pyongyang to end its nuclear program. These stories and more on Newsline at Noon.
It's noon Wednesday, June 25th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Eojin Chu.
It's very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this lunchtime. There's little doubt among political circles and pundits here in Korea that the resignation of Prime Minister nominee Moon Chang-keuk on Tuesday has dealt a huge blow to President Park Geun-hye.
That's right. With two of her recent picks stepping down even before their confirmation hearings, it's back to the drawing board for her reform drive. Choi You-sun has more.
The withdrawal of President Park's second Prime Minister nominee in the past month has put the brakes on the president's reform drive brought on by April's ferry disaster. It's been 2 months since Prime Minister Chung Hong-won tendered his resignation for the government's lax response to the ferry accident, and the search for his successor has gone back to square one. There's a lineup of cabinet minister nominees awaiting confirmation hearings, and the details of a government restructuring plan remain in limbo. The back-to-back personnel appointment failures could come at a heavy price for the president and the ruling party ahead of next month's by-elections. There's mounting criticism within both the ruling and opposition parties over the presidential office's personnel verification system, and the opposition is demanding the presidential chief of staff take responsibility. This means lawmakers are likely to go over the president's nominees for 8 cabinet positions and the chief of the state intelligence agency with a fine-tooth comb at their confirmation hearings next month. Some of them have already come under fire, including the nominee to head the National Intelligence Service, Lee Byung-gi, who's been implicated in illegal political funding activities in the past. Education Minister nominee Kim Myung-soo stands accused of plagiarizing students' thesis papers. Although the 9 nominees don't require parliamentary confirmation to be appointed by the president, what is said at their hearings could have an effect on the president and the ruling party. While there's speculation that President Park is likely to select a politician as her next prime minister, opposition co-leader An Chol-soo has suggested the president consult with political parties before announcing her pick. Choi You-sun, Arirang News.
We've been waiting almost a year to find out what went wrong and who was to blame for the crash of Asiana Airlines Flight 214 at San Francisco International Airport. Well, we've got the answer now. U.S. safety regulators say last July's crash was mainly caused by this crew's over-reliance on automated systems they didn't really understand. Shin Se-min has more.
Pilot error upon descent and an over-reliance on automated systems. That was the cause of last July's passenger plane crash at San Francisco International Airport, according to the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board. Investigators say Asiana Airlines Flight 214 came in too low and too slow in its landing approach, which caused the plane to slam into a seawall, ripping off the tail and sending the fuselage skidding down the runway. 3 people died and another 200 were injured in the crash. The NTSB added that the trainee pilot of the Asiana flight lacked sufficient training and inadvertently shut off an automatic speed control system that might have prevented the accident. A portion of the blame was also placed on Boeing for the complexities of the autothrottle on the 777 jet.
A lot of issues lined up the wrong way, as it turned out, to produce this result, because each one of those issues probably happens a lot by itself innocuously, but and in fact, if you removed any one of those links in the chain, this accident would not have happened. But
Asiana Airlines in a statement said they accept the NTSB's conclusion and that they have been bolstering safety measures since last summer's crash. But the Korean-based airliner also pointed the finger at Boeing, citing inconsistencies with the autothrottle system, which they say led pilots to believe they could maintain the plane speed. Boeing is adamant the airplane performed as expected and that it did not contribute to the accident, saying the 777 has an extraordinary safety record and it is the pilots who were at fault. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, Korea marks a very special anniversary today, the anniversary of the start of the Korean War. And it was during that 3-year Korean War that China sided with the North, and it has continued to stand by its communist ally in the decades ever since. But recent events have pushed Beijing and Pyongyang apart quite a lot, and experts say they're unlikely to become best buds again anytime soon. Our Connie Kim tells us more.
Frosty relations between North Korea and China are likely to continue for the foreseeable future. South Korea's Unification Ministry confirmed Tuesday that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un did not send a congratulatory message to Chinese President Xi Jinping for his birthday this month, unlike last year when Kim reached out, hoping for the Chinese dream to be realized. Media outlets in China are saying that President Xi's visit to Seoul next month suggests that the longtime allies are moving apart, considering Chinese leaders of the past have made it a point to visit Pyongyang before coming to Seoul. Kim Han-kwon of the Asan Institute for Policy Studies says the dynamics of Sino-Korean relations appear to be shifting.
China used to maintain a balance, using the North for political purposes and the South for economic ones. But this is changing.
And Chinese experts agree. Professor Chu Surong of Tsinghua University at a forum on Tuesday said President Xi is trying to put pressure on Pyongyang to end its nuclear development by cutting off the North's access to crude oil and freezing North Korean funds in Macau. The turn of events is a relatively recent development spurred by North Korea's provocations in recent months, which include missile tests and a widely condemned nuclear test in February of last year. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, the South Korean government has conveyed deep concerns to the US government over the results of Japan's re-examination of the Kono Statement, its landmark apology for wartime sex slavery. This comes as Tokyo has started to promote its findings from that re-examination to scholars and experts in the US. Our Son Jung-in has this report.
Japan's look back at the Kono Statement was one of the key issues Tuesday at Vice Minister level talks between Korea and the United States.
We discussed various issues related to history in the region, including the result of Tokyo's review of the Kono Statement.
Meeting U.S. Deputy Secretary of State William Burns in Washington, Seoul's Vice Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yong reiterated the Korean government's deep concerns over the Abe administration's review of the 1993 apology. Korea's foreign ministry views the re-examination as Japan's justification based upon its own independent survey and judgment. However, according to diplomatic sources, Japan is actively spreading the findings to scholars and experts at U.S.-based think tanks. Delivering the results through email, Tokyo is unilaterally claiming the Korean and Japanese governments engaged in prolonged negotiations to hammer out the wording of the Kono Statement. Experts are concerned this may give the impression that statement was the result of a diplomatic and political compromise between the two countries. The email also gives details that Korean comfort women received compensation as well as medical welfare assistance from Japan. Korea's foreign ministry has denounced Japan's move, saying it will release its own stance on the issue and take proper measures at the international level. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
The Parliamentary Defense Committee will hold a Q&A session Wednesday on the recent shooting spree at a frontline army unit that left 5 soldiers dead and 7 others wounded over the weekend. Defense Minister Kim Kwon-jin, who has been tapped to become President Park Geun-hye's top security advisor, will appear and answer questions from lawmakers about what may have caused the rampage carried out by a 22-year-old Army sergeant. Lawmakers are widely expected to accuse the military of poor personnel management and ask about countermeasures to prevent a similar incident from happening again. Also up for discussion will be the timing of a confirmation hearing for Defense Minister-designate Han Min-gu. An F-35 fighter jet, which has been designated as for Korea's next official fighter jet model, caught fire during takeoff at a U.S. air base earlier this week. The U.S. Air Force says the jet was about to take off from an Air Force base in Florida on Monday local time when its tail end caught fire. The pilot managed to leave the jet uninjured, and emergency responders were then able to extinguish the fire. Officials are still looking into the exact cause of the blaze. Reports are saying that Monday's fire marks the second biggest accident involving pricey F-35 fighter jets in recent weeks. Korea has ordered a total of 60 F-35s from Lockheed Martin for delivery from 2018.
Korea's consumer sentiment has improved this month, a sign the economy may be recovering from the effects of April's awful ferry disaster. The Bank of Korea said Wednesday that the Consumer Sentiment Index stood at 107 in June. That's up 2 points from a month earlier. While the figure still falls short of the 108 recorded just before the ferry tragedy, it suggests Korean consumers may be returning to their regular spending habits. The monthly index reflects the overall economic outlook of consumers, their living conditions, and also their future spending plans. A reading above 100 means optimists outnumber pessimists. Now, Korea's nuclear reactor technology has moved into the European market for the first time. The nation's science ministry said Tuesday that a local consortium has won a bid to upgrade a nuclear reactor that is being used for research purposes at the Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands. The $26 million deal is led by the state-run Korea Atomic Energy Research Institute. The ministry said competition for the bid was intense, with others coming from France, Germany and Russia.
And we now continue on with our 2014 Brazil World Cup coverage as 4 matches took place earlier today, including some very exciting finishes.
Yes, one match in particular, and with some of the teams finishing off their group stage matches, C and D. Let's find out who advanced to the next round by turning things over to our sportscaster, SJ Lee, who's standing by. Good afternoon, SJ.
And good afternoon to you guys as well. That's right, some really exciting matches earlier today, this including Italy and Uruguay, who faced off against each other as they both hope to advance to the next round. So let's take a look at the highlights. Now, of course, both nations neck and neck throughout the first half as both teams going into the second half tied 0-0. But the 59th minute, Claudio Marchisco with the red card leaves Italy with just 10 men, and a bit of a controversy as Luis Suarez goes down, biting his opponents again, where he apparently bit Giorgio Chiellini on the shoulder, but no call. In the 81st minute, Diego Godin scores the lone goal, giving Uruguay the 1-0 win as Uruguay goes through to the next round. Meanwhile, England and Costa Rica facing off, both offenses nowhere to be seen here in the 90 minutes. And of course, that ends in a 0-0 draw as Costa Rica finishes first in Group D. Meanwhile, over in Group C, Colombia and Japan squaring off, with Colombia getting on board in the first half thanks to a penalty, but Japan will level it just before the end of the first half. But the second half, Colombia strikes again thanks to Jackson Martinez in the 55th minute, and Colombia continues to score away as they crush Japan 4-1. Lastly, Greece taking on Ivory Coast. Greece takes a 1-0 first half lead thanks to Andreas Samaras in the 47th minute, but the 74th minute equalizer from Wilfred Boney makes it 1-1. But now in the injury time, a penalty is called as Greece pulls away with a miraculous 2-1 victory as Greece advances to the next round. And now moving over to Group H, where according to several reports, Russia might be facing a disciplinary action by FIFA, leading to losing a point on their group standings. Now, over the weekend, when Germany faced off against Ghana, a Russian fan was seen with an anti-Semitic sign. And while none of the FIFA officials intervened, it was Ghana's Soli Montari who made sure the fan was escorted out. Now, the Russian football team might face disciplinary action because of this incident, and if Russia does lose a point, it will leave them with 0 points before their match against Algeria, giving Korea a better chance at advancing to the next round. Meanwhile, the investigation by FIFA should come in the near future. And now finishing things off and staying in Group H, Belgium, who's already got their ticket to the round of 16, plans to take it lightly against Korea in their final group stage match. Now, Mark Wilmots, the head coach of the Belgian national football team, stated that their players have been resting and relaxing after their win against Russia and have been just lightly practicing in their own time. He added that he plans to rest at least 2 starters against Korea, hoping to avoid any unnecessary injuries before heading over to the knockout stages. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
And time now for a look through the international headlines we're following this hour. For that, we connect to our Eunice Kim standing by at the News Center.
Eunice, with the growing list of conquests by the Sunni insurgency, the chances of Iraq being redrawn really across sectarian lines looks to be more and more likely now.
That's right, Mark. As we've been reporting, the Sunni fighters are growing their hold of the country's northeast, or rather the northwest, as the Kurds hold on to the northeast and the majority Shiites are left with the central and southern part of Iraq. That's the picture of a new Iraq that is feared by Washington, as it dispatched Secretary of State John Kerry on an emergency trip this week. And in his final round of diplomacy, Kerry, Tuesday local time, was told by the president of the semi-autonomous Kurdish government, Masoud Barzani, that the insurgency had essentially already created a new reality and a new Iraq, hinting there that the Kurds could take this opportunity to seek their long-sought goal of becoming independent of Baghdad. Meanwhile, the central government looks to be shifting their strategy and forces to keep Baghdad from ISIL militants. Iraqi officials told the Associated Press that Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki was ready to concede for now the regions taken by the Sunni insurgents to focus its firepower on defending the capital city. A local vigilante leader in Nigeria says Boko Haram abducted 91 more people in weekend raids, among them toddlers and more than 60 women and girls. Aji Khalil said the militants shot dead 4 villagers who tried to escape. A local senior counselor confirmed the report, citing elderly survivors of the attack. The latest strike comes as more than 200 schoolgirls remain missing since being kidnapped in April from their dormitories in Chibok of Borno State. A rescue effort is at an impasse. Nigeria's military says it knows where they are but is abstaining from striking in fear of the safety of the girls, while President Goodluck Jonathan has rejected a swap deal proposed by Boko Haram. Ukraine's military says pro-Russian rebels shot down one of its helicopters, killing all 9 servicemen on board. In response, the country's president, Petro Poroshenko, warned he could cancel the week-long ceasefire in place, taking into account, quote, its constant violation by the rebels controlled from abroad. Rebel forces had agreed to observe the truce less than 24 hours before. Following the attack, Russia's President Vladimir Putin asked Parliament to revoke his right to order a military intervention in Ukraine. He also said he hoped the ceasefire would be extended to allow for plenty of time for substantive talks with the separatists from the mostly Russian-speaking East. Amid an intense debate in France over euthanasia, a top administrative court has authorized ending life support for a man in a vegetative state. 38-year-old Vincent Lambert had been comatose since a motorcycle accident in September of 2008, splitting his family on his fate. The state council ruled that doctors should be allowed to end medical support for the man, saying it was in line with a 2005 law that allowed passive euthanasia, or withholding treatment required to sustain life. Lambert's parents and 2 of his 8 siblings say they will take the case to the European Court of Human Rights.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea, connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on Newsline at Noon with Mark Broom and Jin-ju.
I'm Jin-ju.
Market researcher, strategy analytics, said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about... Now, today is a very special anniversary here in Korea because exactly 64 years ago today, on June 25th, 1950, war broke out on the Korean peninsula, starting the Korean War. This when armed forces from North Korea smashed into South Korea.
More than 600,000 South Korean soldiers fought in the war, and nearly a third of them are still alive today. Our Connie Lee met one of them who says the war should never be forgotten.
Around this time every year, he can't help but think of his brothers.
Although we fought in the war together, there are those still living today, while others died young. It still breaks my heart.
87-year-old Lee Chun-nak shows me the names of some of his veteran brothers from the Korean War, engraved in the black marble walls at one memorial hall. Lee's name is one of them. Rewind 64 years back. Lee was just a 23-year-old schoolteacher who had to trade in his books for combat boots as he was drafted into the war.
Because they were short on soldiers, if you were young, you were enlisted into the army. That was September 1950.
At his home, evidence of his time in the war are on the walls, in photographs, and in letters. One letter dates back to 1953, written by one of his closest compatriots in his platoon, a U.S. soldier who went by the name Smitty.
There was an American soldier named Smith, Kenneth Smith. We were practically together everywhere.
Once the war ended and after a few letter exchanges here and there, they lost touch. Lee's been on the search for his American friend since then.
How great would it be to see each other after all of these years? When I see him, I want to tell him that we're more than just brothers.
Along with the memories of camaraderie are also the harrowing memories of war that not only left hundreds of thousands dead, but separated thousands of Korean families once that 38th parallel was drawn and divided the nation. Lee says he hopes the realities of the Korean War, along with all the sacrifices that were made, will never be forgotten in the generations to come.
The fact that our country exists today is from the sacrifices of the Korean War veterans who put their lives at risk to protect this nation. We cannot forget that.
Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Now, moving on, if it felt unseasonably warm last month where you live, you weren't imagining things. It was the Earth's hottest May on record.
Yeah, it certainly was hot here in Korea, and the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration says the average temperature on the planet last month was 15.5 degrees Celsius, and that shatters the previous record set in 2010, and it makes it the hottest May since records began being kept in 1880. It was especially hot in Korea, Australia, Spain, and Indonesia. Experts attribute the record numbers to climate change and El Nino. the weather pattern there, and they widely expect the Earth to continue breaking these heat records.
Good afternoon. Well, we'll finally get some relief from the heat today or the rain today. Daytime highs will be 2 to 3 degrees higher than yesterday, soaring to 30 degrees Celsius across the nation. So we are in for a hot one. And we had a few patches of fog this morning, but it's gradually clearing out and it should be sunny throughout the day. So today would be a good day to do activities that you put off due to the wet weather. In fact, the sun will be quite strong today with the UV levels relatively high, so please protect yourselves before heading out. With that in mind, here are the readings for today. The afternoon high in the capital will rise to 29, and Daegu and Gwangju will rise to 31 and 28 respectively. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like down on Jeju should see a high of 24, while Mount Keungang hikes to 19. Well, that's all for me today, and have a wonderful rest of the day.
And those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Jinju and I will be back at the same time tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.